All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you are ready because it is Tuesday, and you know what that means. Time to do the Tao now and continuing in our series of Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, living the wisdom of the Tao. And by changing the way that we look at the things that we think about with our emotions and our feelings and our thoughts and our opinions and our judgments of the world and the way that we think it is, when we can begin to change the way that we have thought of so many of the things that cause us anger or frustration, or even just the tiniest amount of quote unquote suffering in our lives. When we can change the way that we look at these things, we can begin to change our lives by changing the way that we experience these things, ladies and gentlemen. But today we find ourselves all the way to the 80th verse of the Tao Te Ching. There being 81 verses. And so we are but one away from the end, ladies and gentlemen. And if you have joined me for this series, then thank you so much, because it's been fun and it's been wonderful. It's been profound and it has been life changing. And we have changed our thoughts and changed our lives, all the way from living an unhurried life to living with constancy and living as an enlightened leader and without rules and living without striving, ladies and gentlemen. Living the elusive paradox. The Tao is elusive and intangible. Although formless and intangible, it gives rise to form. Although vague and elusive, it gives rise to shapes. Although dark and obscure, it is the spirit, the essence, the life breath of all things. This is the 21st verse of the Tao Te Ching, giving us the greatest virtue is to follow the Tao and the Tao alone. That was living the elusive paradox and living with flexibility and without excess and from our own greatness, ladies and gentlemen, trusting in your own greatness. That was a great section. That was the 25th verse of the Tao Te Ching. And I have each of these and an extrapolation and an explanation on the thoughts and the philosophies from Wayne Dyer and Lao-tzu on each of these verses and each of these different but life-changing and profound lessons that come to us from 2,500 years ago. Living self-mastery, ladies and gentlemen. And I've always thought, being less serious now, that well, I haven't always thought this, I got this eventually from learning and listening to a lot of people, but it seems that we need to become our own masters. What do you mean, Chase? Well, like if we want to get healthy, we need to become our own nutritionalists and health gurus, so to speak. In other words, in an age of infinite information, when we have all the knowledge we could possibly imagine to research for a lifetime at our fingertips, there's no longer much of an excuse, rather than a lack of time, but normally even that is an excuse, to not learn everything it is that we need to know for whatever area of life it is that we would like to increase the quality of, for us to take the time to learn that and research that and know that and become our own master of that field, where we don't have to go looking outside of ourselves. Because I think in the past, especially, when you think about it like cycles of ages, going from, what was the last one, Pisces, into Aquarius now. But even if you don't think that deeply about it and you just think about the differences of society over 100-year periods, which would be much smaller. But even then, it's like there's this new way of thinking about things. So rather than this idea of, okay, when I want to find help for something, I have to go to somebody who knows more about that than me, and they can tell me what I need to know. And you can see how, without our best interest at heart, those that we're going to learn what it is we quote unquote need to know could manipulate what we need to know in a way to where we always need to know more. And we never find the real answer we're looking for. But that's me being you know, a theorist, we'll call it, creating up intangible theories, ladies and gentlemen. But there is some tangibility to it. So I'm just ranting now, and hopefully you're having fun. Because sometimes I take these a little too seriously. I'm like, all right, let's be focused and stay right on the point so we don't lose the three people that become disinterested when you're just having a good time and rambling. But that's what it's all about, ladies and gentlemen. So I don't know where I was going with that, other than we have to become our own master. And in times like now, where the manipulation to keep us coming back for what it is that we want to know, we can take back our own power, take back our own control, ladies and gentlemen. And in this case, begin becoming our own spiritual masters and living self-mastery. Now, we've come out of living like water, be like water. That was a couple episodes ago. And if you want to check any of these previous episodes out, of course, check out the playlist on my channel or the series entitled The Tao and the Wisdom of the Tao, or something like that. And now, find ourselves on the 80th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Oh, yeah. Hope you're comfy, ladies and gentlemen, and got yourself some tea or a cold beverage and your comfy chair. The tea today says live consciously. Live consciously, ladies and gentlemen, and not unconsciously, just reacting, but rather have an ability to respond. Now, that's my version of responsibility. Sometimes we think of that the wrong way, I think. The 80th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Living your own utopia is what Wayne Dyer titles his extrapolation on this 80th verse. But, ladies and gentlemen, much more of us, I think, could use a way of changing our thoughts in order that we can begin living our own utopia. Well, let's see what Wayne Dyer and Lao-tzu and myself even have to say about this idea. The 80th verse of the Tao Te Ching, ladies and gentlemen, begins by saying, imagine a small country with few people. They have weapons and do not employ them. They enjoy the labor of their hands and do not waste time inventing labor-saving machines. They take death seriously and do not travel far. Since they dearly love their homes, they are not interested in travel. Although they have boats and carriages, no one uses them. They are content with healthy food, pleased with useful clothing, and satisfied in snug homes, and protective of their way of life. Although they live within sight of their neighbors, and crowing cocks and barking dogs can be heard across the way, they leave each other in peace while they grow old and die. And that completes the 80th verse of the Tao Te Ching. A different one than I expected. I'm somewhat surprised, ladies and gentlemen. Normally, he starts out by saying, this is normally what everybody thinks the way is, or this is one way. And then he gives a paradoxical contrary or opposite way that we would think is not the way, but actually is the Tao way, or the way of harmony. But this time he doesn't do that. He literally just describes these people in a small country. They have weapons but don't need them. And they enjoy hard work and don't need machines that would keep them from having to do any hard work. Because, I mean, what would be the point of that? Then what would we do? Maintenance the machines while they do all the... See, this takes on, I guess, all right, this does take on a different philosophy of the way that most people look at work. Because we do want to invent these labor-saving machines. They take death seriously and do not travel far. See, that also, I think, was contrary to what we've learned earlier in this philosophy, is that not to take, not to have this great fear of the unknown, of the transition to the next phase. But that was fun. It's funny it mentions that because that was our episode of Wednesday Wisdom from the Hermetica that we've been doing on Wednesdays for the last 6 months or so, about the, ancient esoteric description of reincarnation. Very fascinating. Since they dearly love their homes, they're not interested in travel. And sometimes home doesn't have to mean so much your living quarters, ladies and gentlemen, but could mean the area around you, the town, or, the community that you live in. Gives you a certain sense of comfort and contentness, as it described there. And I feel this has, this resonates with me because I've been like that. I've never been one who wants to travel very far, but I always have been, there's been a little tinge of ego jealousy to be like, well, wouldn't that be quite an experience to go on a lot of, adventures to other countries and things. But with that being said, although they have boats and carriages, no one uses them. They're content with healthy food, pleased with useful clothing. So the food doesn't have to be fancy and extravagant, but rather useful and necessary. The same with their clothing, and the same with their homes. Nice and snug, not too big, where the echoes are spooky in the evenings, so to speak, ladies and gentlemen. And they are protective of their way of life, although they live within the sight of their neighbors. And you can hear the barking dogs and the roosters crowing across the way. They leave each other in peace while they grow old and die. Very interesting. I did not expect this verse to be this way, especially getting so close to the end. What is Lao-tzu trying to tell us here? Well, I'll save that for next week. I was going to give you the first line of the 81st verse. Now it'll go perfect with this. He says, true words are not beautiful. So what then do you mean? Lao-tzu, well, Wayne Dyer, tell us more about this 80th verse of the Tao Te Ching and living your own utopia. Wayne Dyer begins by saying, ladies and gentlemen, this second to last verse of the Tao Te Ching might have been titled KISS, quote unquote, that is, keep it simple, stupid. Here, Lao-tzu makes a case for an ideal society where conflict isn't a problem. Harmonizing with nature is practiced, and weapons may be present but are never used. So is this the idea of a utopia? I mean, is this what we imagine a utopia to be? It's important, actually, I think, for us to ask ourselves and spend a moment of meditation, or I like to call it contemplation, on what would, a utopia or a quote unquote nearly perfect society look like to you? Because I think we spend too much time thinking about the opposite and not enough time contemplating just that. And I mean, what does that mean for you, ladies and gentlemen? What would it look like? Leave that in the comments below and take a moment to contemplate on that. And so, with that being said, but I always wonder, if you try to solve all the problems out of the polarity or balanced nature of reality, that there is light and dark, and without either side, you cannot have the other. So they are mutually established or depend on each other for their own existence. It kind of begs the argument against the utopian thought of this perfect kind of society where conflict isn't a problem. Harmonizing with nature is practiced. So let's let Wayne Dyer continue to describe about this 80th verse of the Tao Te Ching and what he calls living your own utopia. Ladies and gentlemen, harmonizing with nature is practiced, and weapons may be present but are never used. Well, the ancient Chinese master Lao-tzu, Wayne Dyer says, seems to be saying that staying close to nature, see that I didn't get this direction that it was going. That's why it's important for each of us to have our own meaning from each of these, because I got my own meaning and then Wayne Dyer gets his own, and we can all get our own versions of the lesson from each of these verses of the Tao. And let me know what this means to you, ladies and gentlemen, because it's powerful. And so the ancient Chinese master seems to be saying that staying close to nature and taking pleasure in the basics of life are far more satisfying than pursuing technological equipment and fancy carriages, ladies and gentlemen. He advises readers to keep close to the land, work with their hands, and not compete with the neighboring villages. While it's clear that the world has changed dramatically over the past 2,500 years since Lao-tzu wrote this, I wonder if somebody's got an over-under bet on the amount of times that I say ladies and gentlemen. So we'll see if we hit the over at 14.5, ladies and gentlemen. Just a little comedic relief there for you. Now, nope, not going to say it again. But, this wisdom from Lao Tzu comes to us from more than 25 centuries ago. I mean, we're talking about 500 years before the birth of the quote-unquote Jesus character. And so the advice in this 80th verse offers wisdom for us here, and this entire book does, every verse does, speaks, I think, to us here in our times more than many others before us. But each generation could say the same thing, folks. And so this 80th verse, Wayne continues. Sorry, Wayne, keep jumping in there. Offers wisdom for the 21st century and beyond. Imagine a world, ladies and gentlemen, where weapons are vestiges of the past, displayed in museums to illustrate and warn the populace about an absurdly violent history. Wow, I've never actually envisioned that scenery, and I like that. That's cool. Imagine like a group of students, maybe like 10 years old or 9 or whatever, maybe even younger or maybe older, at the museum. And they're looking at because the museum's real cool because it's full of these old things that people used to use to hurt each other. And nobody does that anymore because that's ridiculous in our modern society. I'm just like imagining from the future here. We're role playing, folks. And so these students are at the museum, and the man who works at the museum, the tour guide, just loves talking about weapons and learning about weapons, but never has any want to use them to harm another human being because we are of a higher consciousness than we used to be. And we now know that harming any human being is harming the generic human being, and it really hurts all of us. And so we've evolved past that in this future society that we're imagining here, ladies and gentlemen. I said it again. But and these kids are at the museum, and there are these weapons that are vestiges of the past and have not been used for 200 plus years since the great end of the conflict. I don't know, this could be a whole sci-fi novel. And they're displayed in the museums to illustrate and to warn the populace and future generations and the children and everyone about what an absurdly violent history we had to get to where we are now at a higher level of consciousness, and what we would have called in the past as a utopia society. But now we see there are still many more opportunities despite having reached such a quality of life through an increasing of awareness. I would say I say this in every video, but just to go along with what I'm doing here, I would say that's exactly what I'm doing here in these videos, is seeking to discover, whether it be the wisdom of the Tao or the wisdom of the ages of any kind, or even the wisdom of modern times, an increased awareness and understanding of reality so that we can in turn hopefully increase the quality of our experience or of our lives and the lives of those around us. And so with that rant being said, that was fun to kind of imagine this future world where the students are in the museum and the tour guide is all into this interesting history that we have. Because I really like to, I think maybe this is getting me, because I really like to look at World War II and, even medieval times. And they were dark times. Whichever time of war and conflict that you look at in our history. And the violence is there to be found. And it is very unfortunate, but it is also interesting to me that when I am interested, or when I speak of, classical weapons, whether it be melee weapons of centuries before, or the firearms of World War I and II, I am separating the negative experience of harming other human beings into the more of a historical, looking at the significance and the maybe philosophical meaning on how certain things changed history and led to a better future. I don't know, maybe it's just weird, or maybe I played a lot of video games with killing, and so you kind of just like separate that out, and that's not the part that you look at when you look at the negative parts of history. or it's not the part that you focus on. I don't know. It was just me connecting to this image of kids in these future museums looking at these weapons that haven't been used for hundreds of years and they're vestiges of the past. And there's still a way that you could be interested in them without ever being interested in or focusing on the absurd amount of violence that was related to them. I don't know why I'm getting off on that tangent, but if you're getting value, consider subscribing. And thank you for being here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm hoping at least some of you are here for me and to join in my ramblings through this journey of thought exploration. And so let's continue, though, with what Wayne is saying here. You'd see the conflicts on this planet exhibited from the perspective of human beings as tiny microbes living on the same body, equally dependent on it and on one another for survival. Yet killing each other and destroying their host anyway. So it's looking at ourselves now, or from this future perspective into the past. War would simply seem senselessly destructive. When we look at the conflicts that have taken place throughout history, we cannot help but see that the hatred and rivalries in ancient and modern times could in a way make no sense. Wayne Dyer just said make no sense, but I'll leave room for debate. Why won't, Wayne continues, or can't, people share the land and live together peacefully? What seems so important that it's necessary to kill each other over it? Even in fairly recent times, those individuals who were so hated that we tried to decimate them have become our allies. So what was all the killing about? Why haven't we learned to live in harmony with the life-giving Tao? And see, I think sometimes you look at history and it's like, those are the things that you had to go through to get to where we are now. But I'm also open to the fact that history is totally, at least the history that we've been taught in the last 100 years is totally wrong from what actually happened. And there could be 1,000 years missing. Those are all very fun things to let the mind wander on. But that's a different topic, ladies and gentlemen. The verse isn't talking about that. It's talking about this question of living in harmony, living closer to nature and peacefully amongst one another, and more simply, without needing the extravagance of clothes and carriages and homes. And so this verse, Wayne continues, these answers to these questions are obviously complex. Admittedly, but unfortunately, they continue to need to be asked. This is why I began this video with like, what would a utopia look like to you? Because this is not a question that we ask ourselves very often. And far more often, we go the other direction. What are all the terrible things that you could possibly imagine? And this is what the media tries to shove down our minds with a funnel. Imagine like one of those foam heads that you can like do arts and crafts with, and then you shove a funnel in the top and you just pour whatever it is they want us to think down the funnel. And we have to begin to remove the funnel, ladies and gentlemen. And also what I was saying at the beginning of this video is become our own masters and stop going. We need to start doing our own research and coming to our own understandings. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't go look at what other people think about things. It means that we do that, but we have discernment and diligence and understand the quality of the resonating truth. That's a deeper subject, though, so I don't want you to think about that too much, because what we're talking about here today is simplicity and finding a quality of life through this simplicity. So this verse doesn't negate, Wayne continues, an effort by you to create ways to live your utopia. Instead, it's offering you an escape from the vicious cycle of hatred, murder, war, and subsequent cooperation before the next cycle of violence erupts. I would say that this lesson, this verse, doesn't negate an effort by you to create ways to live your utopia. Instead, it's offering you a way to escape from the mundane. That we get so, just trudgery through our lives, and we forget. Makes me think of the Bill Hicks quote again. We forget that it's just a ride, and we need to be able to enjoy this. And so we need to figure out how we can do that. And we can return, Wayne continues, to the basics of a peaceful existence by choosing to live simply and placing way less effort on the need to conquer anyone. See, I think this focus on the less effort and the need to conquer anyone goes back to this ego, philosophy that we have this ego mind that wants us to be better. And it comes from survival instincts, which kept us alive for many thousands of years before we created groups and communities that we could depend on each other. But, well, anyways, that's a different tangent as well. It's just this ego understanding that we want to be the best and we have to get ahead. And so when you see somebody has a nice garment, you want to have nicer garments, or that whether that be a home or a vehicle or anything, ladies and gentlemen. But there is a way, and you could see how this moves from wanting to have the nicer thing to eventually conflict and war. And so this idea of you can return to the basics of a peaceful existence by choosing to live simply and placing less effort on needing to conquer anyone, to me, that means like we let go of our ego want to have nicer things for some reason than other people so we can look fancy. I mean, just go back to what the verse was saying here. They're content with their food. They're pleased with useful clothing, satisfied in snug homes. And so it's this idea of like, if we could let go of our ego wanting to have us be greater all the time, and instead let go of our ego and give in to our spiritual part of ourselves that wants to feel greater, not be greater than anyone else, but just feel at peace and comfort, then we must let go of this ego desire to defeat and to get ahead. It's interesting. That doesn't mean that you don't work to achieve goals that you like in your life. You just do it in harmony with the Tao. And we've read all about that in this series, about how to create abundance through harmony with God, the force, the Tao, universe, whatever you call that universal energy that is doing all things. It's beating our hearts and breathing our lungs while we're thinking about these subjects and listening or watching or creating this video in my case. And if you're getting value, thank you so much. I love and appreciate all of you that have joined me for this series. It's been a fun one being here close to the end. And I wonder where we'll go in the next one, ladies and gentlemen, but we will find out very soon. So don't you worry. But thank you so much for being here. Be sure to smash the like button if you're getting value. Now, when you see the inclination Wayne continues, towards creating more war machines, vote instead for candidates who support peaceful ways for dealing with conflict. Your personal choices also align you with the tranquil nature of the Tao. You can opt to do without some of the new technology, some or even all of the time. Now, this is like the ultimate challenge to us here now. I think Wayne gives us this lesson from 20 years ago. It's getting tougher all the time, but you can see more and more people like trying to get away from technology on purpose, which is a great sign to me. I think it's a sign of us increasing in consciousness and no longer living unconsciously and just consuming all the time. But we're starting to create our lives on purpose, which is so interesting that the T said today, live consciously. Your personal choices give you this ability to align and become closer to nature and to live more simply. It's just a matter of choice. Sometimes you could choose, Wayne says, to write by hand and feel your connection to your source as the words flow through your heart onto the paper. It's a fun practice. You can choose to walk rather than drive as often as possible. You can choose to compute numbers without a calculator. And remember phone numbers as a way of personalizing your connections. How many of us remember doing this? And having forgotten so many. I can remember phone numbers of my friend's house before cell phones ever existed, but I can't remember any number of anybody ever since cell phones existed. Isn't that hilarious and paradoxical? And so you can choose to swim or bicycle for exercise in lieu of using machines. There are many labor-saving devices that Lao-tzu may never have dreamed about, but we have nowadays. And you can eliminate them as a part of your simplification routine. Maybe not having email or downloading music is your way of symbolically staying close to the land that Lao-tzu speaks of in this verse. This is a real challenge I can see for many, ladies and gentlemen. In other words, you can know what the modern world offers in a way of information and technology, while at the same time being aware of the areas of life, of your life, where you want to keep things basic, simple, more harmonious with nature, harmonious with the way, with the Tao. I'd like to say that sentence again because I think it's important. In other words, you can know what the modern world offers in the way of information and technology, while at the same time being aware of certain areas of your life where you want to make a specific effort to be simpler, to be more natural, to be more basic, to keep things basic in that area, rather than going the fancy or the technological route. Recognize where you're feeling the effects of information overload. Too many gadgets, overcomplication, too much TikTok scrolling, too much social media scrolling. I mean, it's almost every one of these social media sites now. It's just like it's just a feed of like, holy cow. We need to stop for a moment and actually think. I mean, I don't know. That's just me. I'm a long form kind of guy, which is how you see what I do here on my channel, hour-long videos, and maybe every now and then you'll get a little short version. So, with that being said, let us continue. Recognize when you're feeling the effects of this information overload and switch to a natural environment that pleases you. for whatever amount of time that you choose. Even if it just takes 2 minutes, that's the best way to start. Think about that with meditation or contemplation. Just start with 30 seconds. Close your eyes, and for 30 seconds, just let your mind watch the thoughts go by. Don't try to dissipate them or have a blank mind, but be unattached to your thoughts, as if they're just the train going by, and you're seeing the cars. And each of these thoughts is a car going by. Sorry, I don't know why I said that. Lao-tzu seems to be encouraging you and us here today to simplify as a way to heighten our awareness of our Tao connection, our connection to the universe, to nature, to God, what I like to call the force or the source. I like to give it all those names because really it is nameless. Whatever, that thing is, trying to name that which cannot be named is a silly endeavor, but it's fun for me to try to describe. So that trying out these new attitudes and behaviors by changing our thoughts, we can begin changing our lives because it will begin to help us change the way that we think about our modern life. And we may, in fact, change the life that we're living to a higher quality of life with a bit more simplicity and a bit more harmony with not only nature, but the people around us. So Wayne gives us some practical suggestions here on how we can apply the wisdom of this 80th verse of the Tao Te Ching into our lives today. Number 1, practice radical appreciation. Now, this is an overarching lesson and teaching of Wayne Dyer's that I think we should all adopt as just a personal development or self-development, personal improvement, personal mastery lesson or philosophy or strategy or technique that we need to begin to implement into our lives. Because remember, the way that you create a behavior is by practiced over time, routine, habit. Like at first you force something, and then after you do it 10 times in a row, you begin to slowly do it accidentally over time, and before you know it, you're doing it without even thinking about it. And if we could do this for positive or higher quality behaviors in our lives, we can begin to change our behavior and rewire our minds. But that's also a different science that we can become our own masters about, ladies and gentlemen. Did I hit the over yet? I don't know. Practice radical appreciation. That's the lesson. How do you do that? What is radical appreciation? Well, what is appreciation? And then increase that to a radical amount. And then practice it till it becomes an accidental behavior to where you're appreciating things. All right. Wayne says, quote, begin a practice of joyfully engaging with the things you take for granted. There are comforts such as your home, your garden. I think a lot of people take their couch for granted, or even their chairs and things like that. But your meals, I mean, the privilege of taste. The next few times you eat a meal, think of the idea, the privilege of taste. What do you mean, the privilege of taste, Chase? Well, what if you were a disembodied spirit watching people live their lives and you never had the experience, the physical experience that we have here, being spiritual beings in a physical body, the experience that we have to taste, or the sensation of smell or sight. I mean, all of these things that we take for granted, because most of us just think we're here doing whatever everybody else is doing here normally, which we could be, but we don't really think about what it would be like if we couldn't experience all of these things but we got to see other people experience and wondered what it was like in the mystery of taste and smell and sound and sight and all of these things. Practice radical appreciation. So these comforts, such as our home and our garden, our meals and our clothes and our family members and friends that you experience every day or from time to time, without ever appreciating them, we need to begin to practice a joyful engagement and a radical appreciation of these things. Choose to pay attention. Make the shift by giving thanks and loving appreciation. I was watching the cotton blow through the air off the cottonwoods yesterday. It was beautiful because it's like snow in the summer. So weird. But spend more time close to home, in awe over the many simple treasures that were previously overlooked, possibly, that do make up your life. That was number one, and how we can begin to help change our attitudes and change the way that we think about life, and so that we can increase the quality of the experience of our life by living simply, or living your own utopia. I don't know what I'm going to title this video. Creating peace in life by simplicity. See, I don't know. So this is number 2 here on how we can begin to change our thoughts and change our lives, and living more simply to experience our own utopia. See paradise all around you. Wayne says, change your belief that you must travel. Be worldly and experience distant lands and people in order to have a fulfilling life. So change your belief about that thing. That's odd. It's an odd recommendation. A lot of people love travel, but maybe what he's saying is they don't need it to have this feeling of fulfillment in their life. Coming off the idea of taking our homes and the comforts of our homes for granted. But in fact, Wayne says, you could reside on the same street for a lifetime without ever leaving and know the bliss of the Tao. Keep in mind the thought offered by Voltaire, a wonderful poet. Paradise, Voltaire said, is where I am. That makes me think of, the Austin Powers. He's like, hey, there you are. And the guy goes, do I know you? And he goes, no, that's where you are. You're there. And then that links my mind to the philosophy, wherever you go, there you will be. So if you're an angry, unappreciative kind of person, you could go to a beautiful place and you will find yourself there as an angry and unappreciative person. And so if you are a peaceful person, then you can go to a hectic and stressful place, but you will be there as the kind of person that you are. So the lesson is it doesn't matter where you go. You need to begin to change the way that you look at life, and you will change your life. See the paradise all around you. Paradise, Voltaire said, is where I am, quote unquote. Wayne says, if where you are is at home, with the same people and the same photographs and the same furniture, make it your paradise. I mean, this may be a difficult challenge for people who have gotten in the routine, mind you, of habitual behavior through practiced action, of thinking everything is terrible that they look at. And so be conscious of that. Live consciously, not unconsciously, in a terrible behavior routine because you've done nothing to change it on purpose. Now, listen, I'm not judging. That might have sounded like, hey, It's easy. This is why we're here, to learn and to practice, because it is a challenge. But if you want a better if you want a better quality of experience, then we must take on this challenge and begin to practice purposefully, whether that means faking it till you make it or practicing radical appreciation. Some might call ridiculous optimism, but that's fine. Find joy and solace, Wayne says, in the simple things, the simple pleasures. Change your view to see the pleasure in what you have and where you are now and who you are, and be thankful for that. Cultivate your utopia by feeling the Tao in every cubic inch of space. Powerful, ladies and gentlemen. And finally, we come to why you should get this book for yourself to put it on your shelf if you haven't already found enough reasons for that. I have the book linked in the description below the video. Be sure to hit more and expand the description, and you will find it down there. But Wayne gives us at the end of each of these sections a little bit here called Do the Tao Now, a way that we can once again try to apply this wisdom today, here and now, into our lives. From the 80th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Do the Tao now, Wayne says. Devote a day to food. What? Devote a day to food? Well, that's easy. Appreciate the mysterious intelligence that created food for not only your health and your pleasure. That's so weird that I brought up what was it? Not the pleasure of taste, but I don't know, it's like you're allowed to. The privilege of taste. That's so funny. He says, appreciate the mysterious intelligence that created food for your health and pleasure, and say a prayer with every connection to it. Going grocery shopping, cooking, planning a dinner party, being at a dinner party as a guest, eating at a restaurant, grabbing a snack, or having some popcorn at the movies, are just some of the opportunities to consciously, so weird that the T said live consciously, to consciously, not unconsciously, explore that connection with God, with the Tao, with the universe, with that which is responsible for all of reality and creation. I like to call it the Force. And that which is responsible for all of reality and creation, if you want to call it God for now, created food for us as a necessity for sustenance in this physical experience, but we can also experience as a pleasurable thing rather than just a necessity for health. And it's important for us to consciously realize that in all aspects of life that go around food, whether it be grocery shopping, cooking, planning a snack, just having a snack or popcorn at the movies gives us an opportunity to be conscious and aware of our connection to that great, unexplainable thing that many of us like to call God or the Tao. See these food connections, Wayne continues and finishes up with, as a part of the endless Tao cycle and being and bringing us closer to living in our very own utopia, ladies and gentlemen. In our very own utopia. Boom. That is a boom to wisdom, a round of applause. And the crowd goes wild. And that is a boom to the wisdom and living the wisdom of the Tao in the 80th verse of the Tao Te Ching. And creating peace and happiness in life through simplicity in living in our own utopia. But I think that was also about changing the way that we look at our lives to see more beauty in the things that we take for granted. I'll have to contemplate what I will title that. It's almost 1 o'clock now here, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully we'll be premiering at 3 like normal. Boom, ladies and gentlemen, that is a boom to the wisdom of the Tao. Next week, on Tuesday, we come to the 81st verse, the final verse of the Tao Te Ching, entitled Living Without Accumulating. So maybe these last two lessons are about simplicity and how that can change our thoughts and change our lives, ladies and gentlemen. And that is a boom to Dr. Wayne W. Dyer and Lao-tzu and living the wisdom of the Tao. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through a greater awareness and a greater understanding of the nature of reality. Seek to discover the hidden wisdom of the ages and the mysteries of our history. And remember also that there is no way to happiness, because happiness is the way. So if we can begin to practice bringing happiness to life as an activity, just like we were talking about earlier, having this, bringing this to life, this ability to see the beauty and appreciation that we take for granted. If we can do this, then all the things that we've been telling ourselves, oh, when I get there, when I have this kind of thing, or when I become this kind of person, all of that becomes irrelevant, because then we are there. And then hopefully the entire journey is wonderful, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. I love and appreciate all of you who spend time here with me, A1 and Gorilla Press, and anyone else who joins me here on the channel. It really means a lot to me. I love to hear from you and get back to you in the comments. And so please fire away in that comment section below, as well as join me in the premieres in the future, usually around 3 p.m. on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And I love to go back and forth with people in the chat room there. It's just so great to interact with each and every one of you. And so thank you again. I can't say it enough, ladies and gentlemen. It's funny to see people give me a hard time about the ladies and gentlemen thing, at least family members or loved ones and whatnot. So it's funny to kind of make a game out of it. I think somebody commented one time they could make a drinking game out of it. I wouldn't recommend it, folks. We'll say folks this time. All right. Continue to seek to achieve and maintain happiness. Continue to be the change that you want to see and be the example that we want to set. Until tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, on Wednesday Wisdom, diving deeper into the Hermetica. Join you then, and I'll see you there. Join me then, and I'll see you there. All right. No, 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 no.